Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from a UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. So today let us take up some of the important news from the Hindu newspaper dated 19 July 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion. Now today's first news appears on page number 1 and also on page number 8. It says midday meals have a long lasting impact as per the study. So the study has observed lower stunting among children with mothers who had access to school lunches. And here school lunches has been referred to the midday meal program of the Government of India. So a study has been published in the journal Nature Communications which has been titled as Intergenerational Nutrition Benefits of India's National School Feeding Program, and this study has taken records or data spanning from the year 1993 to 2016. Now this study has simply observed that those girls who had exposure to midday meal program or midday meal scheme of the Government of India, children born to such mothers witnessed lower stunting. That is, such children who were born to mothers who were exposed to midday meal scheme had less stunting as compared to children born to such women who were not exposed to midday meal scheme. So the study has made a clear distinction with respect to the children who have been born to such mothers who were exposed to the midday meal scheme and children born to such mothers who were not exposed to the midday meal scheme. And it has been observed that such children who were born to mothers not exposed to the midday meal scheme witnessed more cases of stunting among such children. So in this backdrop, let us understand about stunting, about midday meal scheme, and also about the important highlights of this particular report which has been published recently. Now before going further, let us also understand the importance of this particular report and also certain facts with respect to this report. So the report has used 7 population level data sets spanning from the year 1993 to 2016, including multiple rounds of national sample surveys of consumer expenditure, national family household surveys, and India human development surveys. So this particular report has been based on actual data which has been taken from these important surveys. And the people who have co-authored this study belongs to University of Washington and International Food Policy Research Institute. So this can be said to be the background with respect to this particular report. So here let us first of all understand about stunting and then we shall understand about the midday meal scheme. So stunting simply means that a child is too short for their age, and this is mainly because of chronic undernutrition. So stunting can be said to be the impaired growth and development which is faced by children, and this results in their lesser height as compared to age. So we can say that a stunted child is too short for their age. So overall we can say that stunting is the impaired growth and development that a child experiences because of poor or chronic undernutrition, repeated infection, and inadequate psychosocial development. Now all this impacts the overall development and growth of a child. Now psychosocial development refers to relation between social features or factors and individual thoughts and behavior. So stunting also impacts social and emotional development of a child in their growing age. Now after understanding about stunting, let us understand about midday meal scheme which was launched as National Program of Nutritional Support to Primary Education in the year 1995 August. So this scheme was launched in 1995 August as a centrally sponsored scheme, and initially the scheme was launched only for primary education, that is only for children who were studying in class 1 to 5th. Now this program was launched by the central government in 1995 August mainly to enhance enrollment of children in schools improve their retention and attendance in schools, and also simultaneously improve the nutritional levels of children going to primary schools, that is, children attending classes from 1 to 5th. Further, this scheme was extended to upper primary class, that is, children in class 6th to 8th. So, this scheme was extended to cover children of upper primary classes in the year 2007. And because of extension of this scheme to upper primary level, the name of this scheme was changed from National Program of Nutritional Support to Primary Education to National Program of Midday Meal in Schools. Further, this scheme was also extended to EGS and AIE centers. Now, EGS refers to Education Guarantee Scheme and AIE refers to Alternative and Innovation Education. So, initially, the scheme was extended to EGS and AIE centers, initially for class 1 to 5th, that is for primary education, and later for class 6 to 8, that is for upper primary classes. Further, this scheme also provides for certain nutritional norms with respect to improving or enhancing the nutritional levels of children. And this nutritional level includes, for primary children, it is 450 calories and 12 gram of proteins, and for upper primary children, 700 calories and 20 gram of proteins. Now, this aspect becomes crucial from your prelims perspective, as questions can be asked with respect to the calorific norms of midday meal scheme. So please remember these bifurcation with respect to calorific norms for primary and upper primary level. Now here you must also know about the EGS and AIE centers. Now these schemes were launched because of the failure of non-formal education, which was launched in 1979-1980. Now the centrally sponsored scheme of non-formal education was introduced in 1979-80 on a pilot basis with a view to support the formal system in providing education to all children up to the age of 14 years. Now this was as per the directive principles of state policy in the Constitution of India. So the non-formal education became a very important component of the overall strategy to achieve universalization of elementary education. However, this scheme failed to achieve its objective. So it says that the Education Guarantee Scheme and Alternative and Innovative Education, that is EGS and AIE, was evolved because of shortcomings of NFE in terms of very low investments, poor community involvement, problems in release of funds, and several quality issues with respect to providing education. So because of the failure of non-formal education scheme, the Education Guarantee Scheme and Alternative and Innovative Education was launched by the Government of India. So it is in this regard the midday meal scheme was also extended to EGS and AIE centers from 2008. So it says that from 1st April 2008, the program covered all children studying in government schools, local body schools, government aided primary and upper primary schools, and Education Guarantee Scheme and Alternative and Innovative Education Centers, including madrasas and maktabs, supported under the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So we see a very wide coverage of midday meal schemes to provide nutritional support to children. Now regarding Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, it's a Government of India's flagship program to achieve universalization of elementary education in a time-bound manner. And this scheme was also launched because of the 86th Amendment of the Constitution of India, which provides for making free and compulsory education to children from the age group of 6 to 14 years. And this amendment added Article 21A in the Constitution of India and also provided for Right to Education Act. So all these aspects related to midday meal schemes becomes important. Now, after understanding about stunting and important highlights of midday meal scheme, let us understand about the importance of this report, as this report highlights about the correlation between stunting and exposure of girls to MDM or midday meal scheme. Now this report has calculated stunting as per height for age Z score. So based on this score, this particular report has provided or highlighted the correlation between stunting and exposure to MDM for such mothers. So this report highlights that height for age Z score or HAS score among children born to mothers with full MDM exposure was greater than that in children born to non-exposed mothers. So a child's health was dependent on mother's exposure to midday meal scheme. Further, the report also highlights that a child's health was also dependent on women's education and also utilization of health services by such women, as children born to such women were mostly not stunted. Now, the report further highlights of improvement in HAS score for mothers exposed to midday meal scheme. And the report says that MDM was associated with 13% to 32% of HAS improvement from the year 2006 to 2016. So gradually the HAS score of children born to such mother exposed to MDM improved. Further, the report also provides a correlation of HAS score with that of socioeconomic status of the women and MDM exposure together. So those women who had better socioeconomic status and who were exposed to midday meal scheme, their children were much better as compared to those women whose socioeconomic status was lower and also who did not had MDM exposure. Further, the report highlights another significant aspect. It highlights better HAS reports for children when birth year was later. Now, if we remember, the span of this particular report was from 1993 to 2016. And it is here where the report highlights that the HAS score or stunting report was better when the birth year was later, that is towards 2016. So it also means that coverage of midday meal scheme improved with years. And HAS report was also better for non-poor households, which we have already seen. So this is one aspect of the report which highlights about a correlation of stunting and MDM exposure. Now, other important highlights of this report includes poor beginnings of MDM, that is midday meal scheme. Now, this report says that due to institutional challenges, only a few states scaled up the program immediately on its launch. So, the midday meal scheme faced certain institutional challenges. And this institutional challenges is also reflective with respect to children born to mothers having less MDM exposure. Now, this report further highlights that as per the National Sample Survey data of 1999, only 6% of all the girls aged between 6 to 10 years received midday meal. So we can say that the midday meal scheme had a poor start because of certain institutional challenges. The report further mentions about Supreme Court interventions as this led to improvement in MDM rollout in different states. So after Supreme Court directions, program coverage between 1999 and 2004 increased in many states. Now, regarding the coverage for girls and boys under midday meal schemes, this report highlights that in 2004, 32% of the girls in the age group of 6 to 10 years were covered under the midday meal schemes. And after substantial allocation through budget to this particular program, this coverage among girls increased to 46% in the year 2011 with respect to girls in the age group of 6 to 10 years. However, the report says that coverage among boys was similar throughout this period. So we see certain improvement with respect to coverage of girls under midday meal schemes from 32% in 2004 to 46% in 2011. Further, the report mentions about state variability in MDM rollout, that is, differences in rolling out of midday meal schemes in different states. Now, this was mainly due to poor finances of the states and also lack of motivation by states to roll out the midday meal scheme. Further, the reports have also stated that stunting was lower in states which had high MDM or midday meal scheme coverage. So we can say that the nutrition of children in such states which had high MDM coverage was much better as compared to nutrition among children in such states which had lower MDM coverage. And lastly, the report also mentions about certain impact on migration. The report highlights that the estimated role of midday meal exposure was weakened in the presence of substantial migration across states. And this can be also associated with the nutritional level of such families who migrated more, as they had less midday meal scheme exposure. Thus, these can be said to be some of the important highlights for this particular report. So after this discussion, the aspect of nutrition and health becomes an important part of your syllabus. And as you can see, questions have been asked in the mains examination by UPSC in GS paper 2. So let's go through these two questions asked in 2019. The question said, Despite consistent experience of high growth, India still goes with the lowest indicators of human development. Examine the issues that make balanced and inclusive development elusive. The next question was, there is a growing divergence in the relationship between poverty and hunger in India. The shrinking of social expenditure by the government is forcing the poor to spend more on non-food essential items, squeezing their food budget. Now, both these aspects can be related to nutritional health or nutrition. Now, the question asked in 2018 read, appropriate local community level healthcare intervention is a prerequisite to achieve health for all in India. Explain. The next question again in 2018 was, how far do you agree with the view that focus on lack of availability of food as the main cause of hunger takes the attention away from the ineffective human development policies in India? So we see that the aspects of health, nutrition and poverty can be correlated and asked by UPSC. So this report highlighting the link between exposure to midday meal scheme and stunting of children must be viewed from the perspective of nutritional development among children. And in this regard, you should also know the fact and the impact of midday meal scheme. So summarizingly, we can say that the midday meal scheme aims to reduce hunger and malnutrition. Another important aspect of midday meal scheme is to increase enrollment in schools. And through increased enrollment, to also improve school attendance. Now, increased enrollment and improved school attendance will further lead to better mixing of students from different category of the society and will overall improve social inclusiveness. And it will also improve girls' education and their health. So these can be said to be some of the benefits of midday meal scheme. Now, there are also certain challenges to implement the midday meal scheme, especially in schools across districts in India. One of the major challenge or even concern is regarding the wastage of food by students which are prepared in the school. Now, another challenge is to manage the entire mechanism of midday meal program by the teachers. So because of this, various teachers across the country have said that introduction of midday meal scheme has increased their workload apart from teaching, as they also have to take care of the nutritional aspect of students. Another challenge is regarding procuring rations, and also because at times funds are delayed by the state. So at times teachers themselves procure certain rations, and based on the receipt they receive funds from the state government. Now, another problem faced by the teachers and students is regarding the lack of infrastructure for food storage in schools. Further, cooking and serving of food in schools again become a problem, and also this leads to unhygienic surroundings because most of the kids, they waste food. As we have already stated that there is certain delay in payments for food in different states. Further, teachers have also stated that introduction of midday meal scheme has reduced learning time among students, as young students are mostly engrossed in the cooking process for the day. Further, there are also reports of poor quality of dry rations provided by the respective state governments. So these can be said to be some of the concerns and challenges with respect to midday meal scheme. Now, this topic becomes very important both from our prelims and mains perspective, as questions can be asked in both the examination. So questions in your prelims can be asked with respect to midday meal scheme as a part of public policy and rights issues, and also with respect to poverty inclusion, demographics and social sector initiatives. Whereas in your mains, questions can be asked in GS paper 1 and also in GS paper 2, as we have seen, especially regarding welfare schemes and also issues relating to health, education and human resources. So after understanding about this report and various aspects of midday meal schemes, let's move to the next article of discussion. Now, the next article to be discussed appears on page number 7. It says, time to build a valuable economy. So, on the eve of 30th anniversary of LPG reforms, this article has highlighted certain challenges and concerns which the Indian economy still faces despite 3 decades of LPG reforms. As LPG reforms brought in 1991 helped to reduce government control and monopoly in the market, it increased private sector participation in the economy, and this overall led to a substantial increase in India's GDP from $275 billion to $2.9 trillion economy. So considering this backdrop of LPG reforms, this article highlights certain challenges and concerns. Now, in the DNS dated 1st July 2021, we had discussed certain aspects with respect to LPG reforms when the interview of Montek Singh Ahluwalia appeared, as the news titled India's 1991 Liberalization Leap and Lessons for Today. Now, in this analysis, we discussed a number of aspects with respect to LPG reforms. We discussed about situations prior to liberalization, the M document which outlined a set of industrial and trade policy reforms prior to the introduction of LPG reforms, trade liberalization, 1991 and various kinds of oppositions faced by the government of India, the aspects of lowering of import duty to its rise, needs to revisit stand on RCEP, employment scenario post lockdown, and also priorities going ahead. So all these aspects have already been discussed in the DNS dated 1st July 2021. So as a continuation from the DNS of 1st July 2021, let's take up today the challenges and concerns with respect to the LPG reforms. And these challenges are primarily with respect to Indian agriculture, stagnation in manufacturing sector, jobless growth, lack of inclusive growth in the Indian economy, stagnancy in the areas of education and health, unbalanced regional development as some regions or some states are witnessing greater development as compared to other, concerns with India's external sector, especially regarding excessive imports and low export, and also regarding poor innovation ecosystem as India spends a very meager amount on its R&D development. So all these can be said to be the broad points for challenges and concerns which still exist today despite the LPG reforms of 1991. So on this note, let's go through the important concerns on each of these aspects. Now, regarding agricultural development and Indian agriculture, the average growth rate of Indian agriculture has been below the targeted growth rate of 4%. So India has been facing stiff challenges to achieve double-digit growth for Indian agriculture. Now, another challenge is that despite being one of the largest producers of food grains in the world, India's share in global export of agricultural commodities has remained stagnant at 2%. Further, the import of cheaper agricultural commodities has adversely affected the income levels of farmers. Now, this clearly shows that the farmers in India have not been able to get the benefit from LPG reforms. Now, regarding the manufacturing sector, it has witnessed stagnation, especially with respect to share of manufacturing to India's GDP at mere 16 to 17% since 1991. So, the share of manufacturing to India's GDP has remained constant for the last 30 years. Further, instead of focusing on labor-intensive industries, the manufacturing sector has come to be dominated by the capital-intensive industries, where the examples of capital-intensive industries includes automobile manufacturing, steel production, oil refineries, telecommunication, transportations, etc. So overall, we can say that the failure of LPG reforms to promote manufacturing sector is considered to be one of the biggest losses for Indian economy. Now, another aspect to be worried is regarding the jobless growth in India. Now, jobless growth refers to the fact when increase in GDP in an economy does not lead to optimum employment creation. For example, let's talk about India. Now, in India, a 1% increase in GDP growth rate leads to mere 0.1% increase in employment creation. And this is also referred as employment elasticity. So we can say that despite LPG reforms, employment elasticity in India is mere 0.1%. Now, apart from low quantity of jobs, concerns have also been raised with respect to poor quality of jobs in India. So this is another concerns with respect to jobless growth, which is poor quality of jobs available in India. And this poor quality of job is also reflected through the fact that 90% of India's workforce is employed in the informal sector, which is characterized by low wages, poor productivity, and also lack of access to social security benefits. So overall, there is a need to create high-paying, high-productivity formal sector jobs for the Indian economy. So the aspect of jobless growth can be said to be one of the biggest concerns for Indian economy despite the LPG reforms. Now, another point of concern is regarding lack of inclusive growth in the Indian economy. Now, here we are talking about concentration of wealth in certain hands and also inequitable distribution of income. So we can say that India as a whole has failed to prevent concentration of wealth and provide for equitable distribution of income. For instance, as per the Credit Suisse report, 1% of the wealthiest in India have increased their share in wealth from 40% in 2010 to 60% in the last 5 years. Further, as per the report, the richest 10% of India owns more than 4 times the wealth which the remaining 90% cumulatively have. So this overall shows concentration of wealth in India and also inequitable distribution of income. So considering this report, the richest 10% of India would take away the majority share of $5 trillion economy. Further, there is also stagnation in the area of education and health, and also the government has failed to allocate sufficient financial resources for the provisions of basic goods and services. For instance, India's expenditure of 3% of its GDP on education is much below the target of 6%. Similarly, the expenditure on health has remained quite low at 1.5% as against the mandated 2.5%. So, overall we can say that government has failed to allocate financial resources for provisions such as education and health. Now, regarding the aspect of unbalanced regional development, the private sector investment tends to get concentrated in the already developed regions such as Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, etc. Now, this in turn leads to disparity in the development across states within the territory of India. So, for example, some of the states such as Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, etc. have made rapid progress. However, some states in the northeast and the eastern part of India still continue to have a lower growth rate. Now, there are also situations where even within an area of state, there are pockets of certain underdeveloped regions within states. For example, Vidarbha in Maharashtra, Saurashtra in Gujarat, Hyderabad, Karnataka region, etc. So all these aspects cumulatively leads to unbalanced regional development in the country. Now, regarding concerns with India's external sector, it says that India's share in the world export has remained stagnant at 1.6% in the last decade. So India's exports has not increased, rather India's imports have increased. So overall, this implies that India is still critically dependent on its import of critical goods such as pulses, oilseeds, electronic goods, active pharmaceutical ingredients, etc. And this huge dependence on import shows lack of self-sufficiency of Indian economy. So a situation of greater import as compared to export leads to current account deficit in the Indian economy. Now, another concerns with India's external sector is that India's export basket is dominated by capital intensive goods such as petroleum products, gems and jewelries, etc. rather than labor intensive goods such as textiles, leathers, etc. So this overall is also leading to stagnancy in exports in the Indian economy. Now, another important aspect highlighted is that unlike China, India has failed to get integrated into the global value chains. So these can be said to be some of the concerns with respect to India's external sector. Now, lastly, it highlights about poor innovation ecosystem as R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP has been stagnant at mere 0.7% for the last 20 years or for the last 2 decades. Now, one of the problems is that there is hardly any private sector investment as the expense is mainly driven by public sector enterprises. So it is mostly government driven. So here the private sector investments in research and development needs to be substantially increased. So these can be said to be some of the concerns and challenges despite 3 decades of LPG reforms in India. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for mains. It says 3 decades of LPG reforms have been a mixed bag for India so far. Examine. And this question carries 15 marks. So based on our discussion, try to attempt this particular question. Now, this topic becomes important both from a prelims and mains point of view, especially 30 years of LPG reforms. So questions can be asked in the aspect of Indian economy and also GS paper 3 in the mains examination, especially regarding issues pertaining to Indian economy and effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy and their effects on industrial growth. Thus, to have a wholesome understanding of the topic which we have discussed today, you can also go through the discussion dated 1st July 2021 where we discussed all these important aspects pertaining to the LPG reforms. With this, let's move to the next article of discussion. Now, the next news to be discussed appears on page number 9, which says Congress allegations misleading as per Ravi Shankar Prasad. And this allegation is regarding the maintenance cost for BharatNet operations. Now, without going into the political bickering between these two political parties, let's understand about CSC, that is Common Service Center Scheme, which is one of the mission mode projects under Digital India program, and also about BharatNet program. Now, BharatNet is a project of national importance. It is basically a project pertaining to network infrastructure accessibility, and this accessibility must be non-discriminatory. And the purpose of BharatNet is to provide on-demand, affordable broadband connectivity of 2 Mbps to 20 Mbps for all households. And this is in direction to realization of the vision of Digital India program in partnership with states and the private sector. Now, this entire project, that is BharatNet, is being funded by Universal Service Obligation Fund, that is USOF, which was set up for improving telecom service in rural and remote areas of the country. Now, the objective of this program is to facilitate the delivery of e-governance, e-health, e-education, e-banking, internet and other services to rural India. Now, the Common Service Center Scheme is one of the mission mode projects under Digital India program. And these CSCs are access points for delivery of essential public utility services. These essential public utility services can be for social welfare schemes, healthcare, financial services, education services and also agricultural services. Further, the Common Service Centers, which is under the Digital India program, aims to provide high quality and cost effective video, voice and data content and services in the areas of e-governance, education, health, telemedicine, entertainment as well as other private services. Now, one of the main features of CSC is that it offers web-enabled e-governance services in rural areas, including application forms, certificates and utility payments such as electricity bill, telephone bills and even water bills. So overall, we can say that CSC or Common Service Centers is a pan-India network which caters to regional, geographic, linguistic and cultural diversity of India, thereby ensuring social, financial and digitally inclusive society. Now, CSCs has been set up under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Now, the PPP model for CSC scheme envisages a 3-tier structure which consists of the CSC operator called village level entrepreneur, the service center agency which will be responsible for division of 500 to 1000 common service centers, and state designated agencies which will be identified by the respective state governments who will be responsible for managing the implementation in the entire state. So these can be said to be some of the important highlights with respect to Common Service Center scheme. Now, regarding Digital India campaign, the objective is to strengthen online infrastructure and improving internet connectivity, thereby making India digitally empowered in the field of technology. So this campaign was launched in 2015 to ensure that the government services are made available to citizens electronically by improved online infrastructure, by increasing internet connectivity, and by making the country digitally improved in the field of technology. So, the initiative of Digital India program includes plans to connect rural areas with high-speed internet networks. Now, Digital India consists of 3 core components, namely developments of secure and stable infrastructure, delivering digitally, and ensuring universal digital living. So, these can be said to be the 3 core components of Digital India program. Now, this topic of Digital India program, BharatNet program and Common Service Centers becomes important both from our prelims and mains perspective, and questions can be asked in mains under GS paper 3 and also under GS paper 2. So with this, let's take up our last article for discussion. Now, the next news appears as an editorial on page number 6. It says, leaving the past behind, Afghanistan's neighbors must help it protect the democratic gains of the last 2 decades. So this editorial says that after the United States and NATO completed their pullout from Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan and most other key locations in Afghanistan, the Taliban have been making advances to return to power. And Taliban has been using violence to return to power in Afghanistan. Now, this contact group on Afghanistan of SCO foreign ministers have not only condemned the violence which Taliban has been perpetrating in Afghanistan, but has also cautioned Taliban against the forceful capture of power in Afghanistan. Now, a recent Central and South Asia Connectivity Conference in Tashkent also expressed similar concerns. So here the question arises is regarding the significance of Afghan stability for Central Asia. Now, Afghanistan has been an important link in the regional trade and culture, as you can see in this particular map, and also Afghanistan plays the role of a connecting bridge for Central and South Asia, as Afghanistan provides the roadways to Central Asian countries. Further, harnessing Afghanistan's transit and infrastructure potential will provide these Central Asian countries with the shortest access to the seaports of Indian Ocean area. However, instability in Afghanistan can spill over to its neighboring countries in Central Asia, including Pakistan and India. Further, any civil war in Afghanistan will lead to refugee crisis in Central Asia and South Asia. And another very disturbing aspect is that Taliban resurgence will revive extremism in the region, and this can become a safe sanctuary for terrorist organizations such as ISIS. Now, gathering of ISIS in Afghanistan along with Taliban will pose security challenges for India as well. So, considering the instability which the Taliban regime poses, Afghanistan should be given enough space in the Central Asian architectures like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, at present, Afghanistan has observer status in SCO. So, full membership for Afghanistan in SCO will create consensus among regional powers over Afghan question, and it will also help to fill the vacancy created by withdrawal of United States. Now, questions can be asked with respect to current events of international importance and also regarding world geography, especially regarding the map of the Central Asian region. And in the mains, question can be asked under GS paper 2, especially with respect to effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries, that is of Afghanistan, on India's interest and Indian diaspora. So with this understanding, let's take up the question for the day. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements. First, the Education Guarantee Scheme, an alternative and innovation education, was evolved because of shortcomings of non-formal education scheme. Second, Midday Meal Scheme covers children studying in government, local body and government aided primary and upper primary schools, and the EGS and AIE centers including Madrasa and Maktabs supported under Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements. First, Arctic region is completely devoid of any form of heat or warm air. No, this is incorrect, as there have been recent phenomena. Second, lightning in Arctic region is periodic at every 5 years. No, this is again incorrect as per recent phenomena. So the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So here the correct answer is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. So with this we come to an end to today's analysis. Thank you for watching DNS.